make this work. In the meantime, I'll say thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad to talk to you today about what we're doing at Iversity. I'm curious to see, what the reactions will be. I think I haven't given this presentation in front of this kind of audience because Iversity, we started out in the field of MOOCs. We're the first European MOOC platform, and we ventured into professional learning about a year ago. And what I want to share with you today is, the experiences we've made doing that, and the things we've, discovered. And so I'm going to talk a bit about our product as well, but I think there are more general lessons to be taken away from it, and I hope those will be interesting to you. So let's see whether we can, if not, I can also just, do that manually. It's not a big deal. Well, you know what, I'll just do it, it's fine. I'll just use the keyboard. Unless, should we, okay, try this once more, no, okay. So somehow this doesn't want to do it. Maybe it's my computer. Well, anyway, here we go. So I think this is a bit too loud, right? It's a bit over, oops. This is better? Yeah, I think this is better, otherwise it's a bit annoying to listen to. So, first, introduction. Who's Iversity? Well, as I said, we launched in 2013 with the first European MOOC platform. We have over 1 million course enrollments across, dozens of courses. We've ran over 100 courses with over 100 partners. These partners are universities, but also other institutions. We've had a course with the European Union, with the United Nations, with the WWF, so, a broad range of institutions, but also with large companies such as KPMG, and I'm going to mention that again later. We have a number of large corporate clients, and we've received some warm words from the press over the years. In principle, what we do is shown here. So we work with partners, as I mentioned, to create courses that we put on our platform, and then we sell them to individuals as well as to companies. And in that process, we do 3 things. We work on course development. So how do you make a good online course? How do you make a great online course? Because that's something that these partners often don't really know how to do. They may have experience in teaching on-site, but they don't really know how to bring it online. Then we deliver that course on our platform, and as I said, we do the distribution as well. Just a basic model, so so you have that in the back of your mind as I'm talking about it. Now, one thing that is a distinction I'd like to make is that I think we really have to move beyond what is typically known as e-learning. Because, I often get that question from people saying, oh yeah, so what is it that you do? And I say, well, we're in online education. They say, yeah, so that's e-learning, right? And I'm like, yeah, that hasn't worked, e-learning. You've been doing this for 20 years, no one likes it. Why are you in that business? And I'm like, well, because I think you can do it differently, and I think you can do it better. And that's exactly what we set out to do. So we really want to move beyond this paradigm of clicking forward 27 times and then closing the site, which is what a lot of e-learning is like still, unfortunately. So if we compare what we do to these kind of old school solutions, the key difference is that we understand learning as an active social process. Active social, very important. So it's not just a library of content. Here's all this stuff. Go look there. You'll find what you need. The kind of thing, lynda.com, for example, they're great quality videos, but that's not all you need for learning. There's this nice quote by David Wiley, an educational thought leader from the US, who said, if high quality content was all that was needed for learning, the library would never have evolved into the university. Yeah. So the image we have in mind when we think about how we want our courses to work and how we want our platform to evolve is what you see on the right. People coming together, learning with and from each other, rather than a library of stuff where you have all sorts of things, but it's not really very animated, let's say. For that to work, there are three key elements: content, context, community. What do I mean by that? So content is pretty clear, right? So that's what you have in traditional e-learning. It can be multimedia content, video, text, audio, images, all the rest of it. That is important, but that's not all you need. You need context, which means really assignments, where you apply what you've learned in a different context. Yeah, case studies, these kind of things, where you move beyond multiple choice also. You know, not just checking whether someone knows the content and has understood it to some extent, but where people apply, analyze, evaluate other people's work, and create their own artifacts. And then thirdly, you need community. You need to work with others to understand the material in depth. And if you look at the intersection of these three elements, that's exactly what happens in a university environment, actually. So self-study, that's what you do with a textbook. You go through content and you have some assignments. Tutorial is essentially a group of people coming together to grapple with assignments. And lastly, in the classroom, what you do is you discuss content in a seminar kind of fashion. So these three elements that make up university learning, in my opinion, are what also should make up good online learning experiences. And these three elements are characterized by three adjectives: emotional, interactive, and social. So when it comes to the content, we believe it's really important to grab people by the gut, you know, to make it an emotional experience, to not just say, you know, like professors often do, you know, these are my 10 topics, I'll start with the definitions. You know, you're already asleep. Like, that's not, you know, how you capture people's attention. If they're used to Netflix, you kind of have to think a bit more about it from a storytelling perspective. You know, use the hero's journey to tell a story that's engaging. So, for example, we were talking to Deutsche Bahn, the German railway company, and they were thinking about reworking a security training. And the same security training people have been hearing for 20 years, every year. And you know, there's one way of saying, you know, these are our rules that you have to follow, please learn them by heart. And it's another to say, you're the hero of this story. There's an accident about to happen. You can prevent it. By the way, here are the rules that help you do it. You know, it's a completely different way of engaging people in that learning experience. Second point, interactive. If you look at these two kids there, you know, the kid in the white shirt, this is how he's sitting there. You know, he's really engaged. And I think there are two types of learning. There's this kind of lean forward learning, and then there's sort of the lean back learning where you click play and you sit back and you sort of let it come at you. That's the kind of attitude we want to inspire. We want people to be active like this. And there's a reason he's that engaged. And that is that there's someone else watching. That's the other kid in the black shirt. And that brings us to the third point. It's a social experience. You're not there by yourself in isolation, but you know, if I perform well, there are others that are going to click like, and they're going to give me feedback, and they're going to say, hey, great, you did a great job in this. Thank you very much. So it's these three elements: content, context, community, emotional, interactive, social, that need to come together. So how do we get here? Like, why do I think that I know this works? You know, like, did we come up with this, you know, doing research in a lab for 3 years? No. This is actually inspired by practice. In 2012, when the MOOCs first you know, entered the scene, we were thinking, okay, how can we make use of this phenomenon? How can we bring this to Europe? You know, we were just starting out as a startup. We didn't really, you know anyone, and no one knew us. Why would anyone want to work with us? Well, we thought, okay, we can either look for the needle in the haystack to find professors who were interested in doing online courses, or we could turn it around and hold a magnet over the haystack and see what kind of needles come out of it. And that's exactly what we did. So we partnered with, you don't need to read this, by the way. We partnered with the Stifterverband für Deutsche Wissenschaft, which is a very renowned foundation. They give out about 100 million euros a year to German higher education. And this is our cooperation agreement. And we decided to launch a contest, the MOOC Production Fellowship. So we gave out 250,000 euros to professors who were interested in doing an online course, 25,000 euros per project to create a new kind of online learning experience. And that was really successful. We had over 250 applications from 20 countries with different kind of design, course designs, instructional designs, and of course vastly different topics that applied for this funding. And then we made a selection in a two-step process. There was a public voting procedure, and then there was a jury decision, and we identified 10 winners. One of those was Design 101, a small institution in Italy, a handful of students, unknown, no Harvard by any stretch of the imagination, but they came up with a really great way of doing an online course that really embodies what I just told you. So that course consisted of homeworks like this. There was content, sure, but the core of the course were these kind of assignments. So they said, look, come up with a design related to the topic of cooking. So you think kitchen utensils, ingredients, that kind of thing. And people then responded in the comments section with their design ideas. So you see some on the right here. So it was a very creative course. But it inspires people, that kind of thing, not just to get 100% on a test, but to think outside the box. We had a student who said, look, I'm going to make pancakes, and my design is about pancakes, but my pancakes are a little bit different. My pancakes are made from felt. These are my ingredients, and these are the tools I'm going to use, and those are my pancakes. Yeah? I think this example shows really well that if you take this kind of open approach to what a good solution may look like, you may get results that you didn't expect that could be, better than what you expected or more interesting. And that's an interesting approach to take. So we actually did an exhibition at the University of the Arts in Berlin after this course was done. We had people from 40 countries send in their contributions. This is what it looked like. And the topic was blue flowers. And there again, it showed that, sometimes you can find really smart solutions to, a problem that you could respond in an infinite number of ways to. And yeah, I really like this, that one student did. And we even had two students who took the course together, here they are, with the parents live on Skype, where he proposed to his girlfriend and asked her to marry him. So when people talk about the engagement problem in e-learning, we really solved that. I mean, you can't have more engagement than an actual engagement on stage, yeah? So that worked really well for us, and they really had a lot of fun taking this course, clearly. We then thought about, okay, how can we use this kind of approach in a business context? And our first course that we launched last year was Visual Thinking for Business. So it's about how you can use visual metaphors to better get your point across. So think about a leadership context, a product development, design context, but also, sales. Oftentimes having visual metaphors in your presentations at the flip chart, the whiteboard, really helps for people to remember what you're talking about. And there we turned what you just saw, where they used the comment function in the design course, we turned that into an actual feature on our platform, and this is what it looks like today, where you can see other people's work, and you can browse through it, and then if you find something that you like this, for example, you can take a look, and people can comment on it, and of course you can look at it in detail, and this is how this works today in a business setting. So what people do in this course is, they work on worksheets. So you have an assignment, you watch the video lecture or read something about visual thinking. Then you print out this kind of worksheet, you sketch a bit and then you take a picture of it, and you upload it to your learning journal, which then ends up in this content stream, and you can see what all the other people are doing. And it gets more complex. So here it's about illustrating certain topics. Then you add color, it gets more complex. Then you take it to a business setting. So here someone's drawing icons. How can you illustrate something like influence? And I think there are some neat illustrations that this person has found. Then people are experimenting with all sorts of things. Here it's about a process, illustrating the process of cooking spaghetti. What is it that you need to do, and how do you have to do it in a visually engaging way rather than a list of bullet points. And there someone, that's the one we saw earlier, illustrates the business model of the German railway company Deutsche Bahn from a customer-centric perspective. So they have the products, the sales channels, the customer needs, and the company profile. Now, this is, of course, all to practice using visual metaphors in presentations. So what's next? Now, I showed you the learning journal and where people share the work they've done. Again, active social learning, working on assignments and discussing those with others. The next step, of course, is that you can do peer evaluations. That you say, okay, you've done this great. Take a look at 3 people, the work of 3 other people. Take a grading rubric and give them feedback. Okay, so how do they perform on criterion 1, 2, 3? Tell them something that they did really well and some way they could improve what they did. Then you can take these evaluations, and that way you can scale evaluation, qualitative evaluation, and make that you can do that with 10 people, you can do that with 100 people, you can do that with 1,000 people. Our largest course actually had 96,000 students. So taking this kind of approach really enables you to scale qualitative feedback, which would be hard to do otherwise. Then the next step is to use this as a sort of competition. If you have these evaluations, if you let, for example, everyone write an essay, and you let them evaluate it using peer grading, then of course the next step would be to just sort all of these essays by quality. And whether something is a 4 or a 5 out of 10, you can argue about that for a long time. And not everyone might be super precise in their evaluation. But whether if something got 10 out of 10 from 5 different people, it's probably really good. And then finding that and making that available to everyone in the course could be really interesting. And it could also be really interesting to the instructor, which could be, in your case, the L&D department. Maybe there are some ideas that bubble to the top that you wouldn't have expected from far-flung places in the organization. If you think about having 1,000 people in the course from all over the company in different regions and so on, there might be some unexpected contributions. You can also use this idea of peer learning, you can moderate this idea of peer learning in interesting ways. So say, for example, you let students first take a small demographic survey about who they are in terms of age, male, female, years of experience, department, geography that they work in, and so on. And then you could match students based on these criteria if you want to achieve a certain mix. So say in a leadership context, you have male students evaluating the essays of female students and the other way around, because they do have different perspectives, and that change of perspective might be quite beneficial. So there again, you run this peer review exercise. The platform automatically sorts the work so that you have this match, and that way you can moderate the kind of the kind of peer review that's taking place. And as I said, you could do that by any criterion, age or department or so on. It's just one idea. The next thing I want to show is something that I think is important, because oftentimes people think about online learning still as like, oh well, there are certain things you can do online, and then there are other things that you can't. And if it's about sort of humans, then you can't do it online, and it has to happen in the flesh. But statistics you can learn online. And then there's this idea of flipped classroom. Okay, let's put the content learning first, and then when they've done that, they come to the classroom, and that's when the real learning happens. And we would like to challenge that, because I think there are a lot more things that you can do online if you do them right. And one of the primary examples that people often give is leadership. So in a leadership context, people always say, you have to talk about that in person. Now, if you think about a typical e-learning, what would be like? You have two people yelling at each other in the hallway. It's a short video. Then it stops, and then it asks you the multiple choice question. What do you do now? I go there, and I yell at them as well. I turn around, and I walk away. Or I go there, and we have a reasonable conversation to resolve the situation. Now, of course, you check the last option, and you're done with it. But have you really learned something? Like, what does it mean to have a reasonable conversation? That, of course, it's still quite tricky to do in practice. So the way we think about this, how this could work, is that we say, okay, imagine you have that case. You have a video, two people fighting. It stops, but then you don't get the multiple choice question, but your webcam comes on and says, okay, your turn. What exactly would you say? And then you have to think about not just what would you say, but also how would you say it? What kind of tone do you give to it? Because that's key in this kind of situation. And imagine, these kind of contributions by all the students uploaded to the platform into a stream of content like I just showed you on the platform. And then you can go in and like people's responses, so you can then sort them by likes and find the most interesting pieces, as I explained earlier. But you can also go in and comment in detail, say, look, the way you phrased that at second 27, that really got to me. Or there, I would have shut down. That didn't work. I think you have to rephrase that. And it will be really interesting to see how people react to the situation very differently, depending on, again, whether they are young or old, male or female, cultural background. There are lots of different influences, and there is more than one correct answer to this kind of question. And that's really what we focus on at iversity, is what we call grayscale learning, where it's not about yes or no, black or white, but about the many shades of gray in between, where people come together to negotiate truth and learn with and from each other. Because in a context, in a leadership context, for example, there isn't one right textbook answer where you can get 100% on a test, but there are different approaches, and one person might resolve that situation with humor, and another person may take a completely different approach, and both might be very effective. And then it's really interesting for people to come together and talk about that, we believe. And that's true in leadership, that's true in sales, that's true in all sorts of situations where it's about people. And I think whenever you apply something in practice, you always get to that area where it's about the shades of gray. If you think about IT, basic syntax, like programming HTML, of course, you can get 100% right. That's something that you just have to learn. But if you talk about architecture in software programming, you can make it more secure, or you can make it faster and better with in terms of usability. Now, which is a better solution? There you have to come together and talk about it, because there is no one right answer if you have a multidimensional objectives. So to summarize this, I brought you our design principles. We distinguish here between the old paradigm and the new paradigm. In the old paradigm, we often thought of the students as a vessel to be filled with knowledge. What we say is that students are active creators and constructors of knowledge. And they come together and construct the knowledge in exchange with their peers, working on assignments, and not just by learning by heart. Secondly, the old paradigm assumes universalism. This is the correct response. These are the 3 golden rules of giving feedback. We think more about contextualization. As I explained, You know, if you have a situation where there's a conflict, there may be many answers that are correct, and they might look very differently. The CEO has to deal differently with the situation than an intern if there is a conflict, you know? And their correct responses will look very differently. So it's important to contextualize. Thirdly, the old paradigm was adapted to conformity and universalism, as I explained. We think of learning as adapted to diversity. So there you live in a world where you have a very diverse organization, where you have a very diverse group of people that have to come together and work together. You're operating in a diverse set of markets, and you know, your clients are diverse, and therefore you need to think in terms of diversity about teaching and learning. And lastly, we move from competition and individualism, where, you know, it's about do you have 99 or 98% on a test, to a new paradigm where it's about cooperation and relation. If you think about the learning journal and what I just explained about learning with and from each other, the key is, I mean, there can be a competitive element to it, but the key to learning there is that people open up and talk to each other about, you know, how they see things, and you know, pass judgment on each other's work, give feedback, tips, and support each other. Oh, I almost forgot about this one. That's also very important, and that is that we move from assessment of learning to assessment for learning. If you look at the picture at the left, she practiced probably by herself for a long time, and now she's performing, and she's evaluated by a group of judges, and they're going to pass a judgment and tell her this was good or this was bad. But that's it. If you look at the picture at the right, they're there together, standing in front of the mirror and like correcting what they do, you know, instantly throughout the process, in a joint process, where, you know, the last person here might tell the person in front, look, I think, you know, you have to adjust there a little bit. And that's how we see assessment. It's not about high stakes testing at the end of a course, but having exercises throughout that make people practice and re-practice and practice and practice, so they actually get better. So at the end of a course, they don't just know more, but they know how to do something better. Okay, in summary, traditional e-learning, web-based trainings often only get to the first two steps on Bloom's taxonomy. You know about a topic, or you know of a topic, and you understand it well enough to be able to answer a few questions about it. But that doesn't change behavior in the workplace. We have to get to a point where people don't just know and understand a topic, but where they apply what they've learned in different contexts, where they analyze other people's work, where they pass judgment on it, evaluate it, and where they create their own artifacts. And that could be a picture like I showed you in visual thinking, but that could also be, of course, an essay, it could be an Excel model of a business case, it could be a PowerPoint presentation, whatever it may be. But I think it's really important to get people to do stuff in exchange with others, which again is illustrated there. Active social learning, as I explained at the outset. Taking this approach, I believe what we can do is that we can create online courses that are as effective as the best of on-site training in terms of quality, but are at the same time as scalable as traditional e-learning. And for the most part, e-learning has been introduced in organizations because it's cheap and it's scalable, but it wasn't very effective. It was effective for compliance because there no one really cares about learning so much. When the learning matters, you better do it in a seminar. And we believe you can bring the two together so that you have an effective learning experience at a reasonable price point at scale. So, if you want to learn more about all of this, well, there's one thing, there's a book. That's a book I co-authored with a philosopher of science, and if there are people here from the university, that might be of interest to take a look at, and it's thinking about how the university may change going forward. If you're from a corporate setting, we have a course on corporate digital learning that we've developed in collaboration with KPMG. It's a free online course. You could just Google corporate digital learning iversity, or you can go to the URL, sign up and take a look. And lastly, if you are interested in what we do and you feel like, hey, this is something that we might want to use, go to business.iversity.org. There you can learn more about what we do and how you can work with us. And with that being said, I very much look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.